it's hard to keep up with everything that's happening. Israel is bombing Lebanon, is embroiled in Syria, is violating human rights and committing atrocities in the West Bank, committing genocide in Gaza, and up until 18 hours ago, waging a war on Iran, where a ceasefire was brokered by Donald J. Trump, but it appears that the last 2-3 hours also that is up in the air. Everything is just unraveling. We have Scott Ritter with us to help us try to make sense out of everything. We're just trying to focus on one front, on the Iran front, and we're going to do it with Scott. So, Scott, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Scott, can you help us? Can you bring some clarity to the situation that's unfolding over the last 24 hours?
Well, wars are easy to start. They're harder to finish, especially when neither side has achieved a decisive victory. When we take a look at the events that led to this tentative ceasefire, we had Israel literally begging the President of the United States to bring about a ceasefire. But strangely, at this moment of Israeli weakness, we had the Iranians rapidly agreeing. And the implication of that is this war was not going well for either side, and that both sides were desperate to get out of this war, which I think highlights the reality of modern war. Both sides made miscalculations in terms of what the other side would be able to do. If you remember back during True Promise 2, a journalist, a well-known journalist, wrote an article that said an F-35 approaching the Iranian airspace was lit up by Iranian radar and had to turn around. And the implication was that Iranian air defense was just rock solid. Turns out Iranian air defense was not rock solid. It was porous, and that the Israelis were able to range, I'm not going to say freely, but range at will over Iran, including Tehran, and inflict heavy damage on Iranian targets. Meanwhile, Israel labored under the pretense that their Iron Dome system, reinforced by American anti-ballistic missile capabilities, would largely shield them from a harm from Iranian ballistic missiles. And that turned out to be a fallacy as well. Israel has suffered as it has never suffered before in its entire history. The damage done to Israel remains unknown because Israel was compelled to put a media blackout on what was being done, or else the Israeli population would be up in arms. But the truth will come out. Iran delivered a very, very heavy blow to Israel. And so here we have two punch-drunk nations, neither of whom have achieved their objectives. Israel did not achieve the objective of eliminating the nuclear program. They did not achieve the objective of eliminating Iran's ballistic missile program, and they did not achieve change. Iran did not back. And so, nothing has been accomplished except 12 days of death and violence. And now we're left to pick up the pieces. And, where we go from here will depend on the nations that weren't directly involved in this conflict and how much they're able to because I don't think Israel wants to continue this fight. They know what has happened. They know what could happen next. And I don't think Iran wants to continue what has happened to them, and they don't want it to continue. So we actually, because of this inconclusive outcome, we're sort of at an important crossroads. If we go business as usual, then this conflict will never end. Sides will simply regroup, and we'll find Israel and Iran once again attacking each other. But if we head down the path, of addressing core issues and moving forward, we have the chance to begin a process of not just peace between Israel and Iran, but settling the question of Israel and how it interacts with its neighbors, including issues of Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, etc. So I don't want to be too pessimistic. I do think that the fact that Israel just got hit in the face harder than it's ever been hit before, people need to recognize this reality. Politically, this war was unsustainable for Netanyahu. That's why he was begging for peace. Militarily, his jets were starting to not function. F-35s are very fickle aircraft. They require a lot of maintenance. In high-intensity combat operations for 12 days, these planes were not ready to continue the mission. Israel was running out of interceptor missiles. So, Israel, isn't as cocky as it appears to be. Israel always hides behind a subterfuge of self-confidence. But I think Israel's scared, very scared about what happened to it. I think Iran, likewise, is not happy about what happened to it. Heavy damage to industrial facilities, to government facilities. Tehran was bombed heavily. I think Iran, likewise, doesn't want to repeat this exercise. So if you start with that as a working premise, and you have the world, and we also need to understand this: the world dodged a bullet. Do you know how close we were to Iran shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and striking regional oil production facilities? Had that happened, you might not have electricity right now, and I might not be able to put gas in my car. We would be looking at a global energy crisis, the scope and scale of which we have never experienced. And while the average person may continue to be ignorant of that outcome, trust me, major world leaders aren't, and industrial leaders aren't. And now they've woken up to, it used to be hypothetical. They could do this. They could do that. This could happen. We just saw it almost happen. We now no longer can speak of, well, Israel would never bomb Iran, or Iran would never attack Israel with massive missile strikes. We now know that they would, and we know what the potential outcome could be. And I think the world right now doesn't want to head down that path again. So I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on solving problems now than has been in the past.
Scott, but I'd like to go to that is an excellent analysis of what you just provided. Provided that the ceasefire holds, it seems that it's not holding. I'm on X right now, and it says this is not even an hour ago, a few minutes ago. Donald Trump is feeling quite annoyed at and perhaps betrayed by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu after Israel launched attacks on Iran, violating the ceasefire. He's aimed the bulk of his anger at Israel, saying he would try to avert further planned attacks. And there's another post here that's interesting. It says that he's really unhappy with Israel. These are Al Jazeera posts, I have to say. He's called on Israel to stop dropping bombs and to bring your pilots home now. And there's another post of his on Truth Social saying, Israel is not going to attack Iran, or planes will turn around and head home while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran. Nobody will be hurt. The ceasefire is in effect. Thank you for your attention. And then he puts out another post, full capital, 6 minutes later. It seems that maybe Netanyahu didn't like this one-sided approach of Trump against him. And he puts out just a one-sentence full capital going, Iran will never rebuild their nuclear facilities, ! So is the ceasefire going to hold? Is Israel, even though they are actually not in a state to uphold this war, as you just so eloquently explained, are they deliberately upending the ceasefire? They can't. The cost of this war on a daily basis is crippling them. Plus, the reports that are coming out of Israel is that the claims they're having on damages from society, from the civilians, are more in 12 days than the claims they've had over the last 20 months from the damages they've incurred over the Gaza war. What's happening with Israel and Netanyahu, and why is he acting so erratically? Is he feeling that once the ceasefire holds, he will actually lose control of power in Israel and maybe lose his position, and thus his immunity against everything that's awaiting him? Can you provide clarity on that also, please?
If Netanyahu is seen as having lost this conflict, it's over for him politically. He cannot survive. He's to explain a very heavy price tag. He's going to have to explain inconclusive results. And you can only do that if it appears that you are in a dominant position. So Israel didn't like the fact that Iran pummeled it up until the last second of the ceasefire. That was Iran establishing a dominant position because, again, the Iranian government is in a similar position, having to explain to the people why they got here. Was it worth it? have you ever seen two children, at the end of a fight and they just keep touching you? That's what's happening right now. Now, hopefully, we can separate the children and there won't be any more fighting. But the reality is they're going to get in another fight. I don't think we're going to see full scale war, but I have low confidence that this is it. I don't see. I mean, Israel just bombed Iran, so now are the Iranians going to take that? Are they going to say, "Oh, we're going to let Israel get the last word"? Israel started this war, and so the Iranian perspective has been, doesn't get the last punch, we get the last punch. So is Iran going to do something? I don't know. But this is a very, very dangerous time. But what I will say is it's in neither party's interest to continue this war on the level that it had been being waged. Neither side wants it, and neither side is capable of sustaining it. So, I do see eventually this ceasefire holding, but right now we're in a very, very difficult time.
No. Oh, Trump also posted, Israel and Iran are fighting so long that they don't know what the F they're doing, which is exactly what you've just explained with the two children, possibly.
Well, it's difficult for me to give Trump too much credit here. Remember, he bombed Iran without any legal authority. He worked with the Israelis to set the Iranians up for the surprise attack. And so we have to take everything he says with a grain of salt. This is a man who is responsible for this war, responsible for the overemphasis on Iran's nuclear program. And if he's not careful, he'll be responsible for the ceasefire that, he may have played a role in falling apart. I mean, he needs to understand that the less he says about Iran's nuclear program at this point in time, the better. Because Iran will not back away. This is a red line for Iran. It's not going to happen. So he needs to shut up. But this president's incapable of shutting up.
Last time we spoke, you were optimistic about the upcoming U.S.-Iran talks that were about to commence under the sponsorship of Oman, and they made it all the way to the fifth round. And then, as you say, the Israeli strikes came. Did Israel sabotage a deal that was already within reach because they were progressing? Or was Trump actually putting up a peace posture as a smokescreen? Was it Trump who colluded with the Israelis, or was he honest in getting an agreement out of those talks and he got sabotaged?
Well, strangely, we know the answer because of Senator Marco Rubio, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has admitted that on March 7th, the president and Israel made the decision to strike Iran. March 7th. The talks didn't begin until April 14th. The talks were always a subterfuge. Okay. Always a subterfuge. The United States was never serious about these talks. Now, I can't say that Steve Witkoff knew this. He probably didn't know this. And so maybe Witkoff was negotiating in good faith. But if you saw, Witkoff would go in and say, we have a deal at 3.75%. And then the president would contradict him, zero enrichment, zero, because the president had to make sure that the talks weren't successfully concluded. He has to extend the talks. And then he said, okay, we're going to have a final round, sixth round on Sunday. What was Sunday? The 13th, 14th, on the 15th or the 16th, maybe Monday the 16th. We're going to have a final round in Oman. This is it. And Israel said, yes, we're going to wait for the final round. And so Iran said, okay, we're going to prepare for this. Their lead negotiator, one of their lead negotiators, Ali Shamkhani, was on TV 2 days before he apparently was assassinated by the Israelis, saying, no, we're ready to sign a treaty forbidding nuclear weapons. A treaty means that there's verification clauses, so there'll be additional inspections attached to that treaty outside the framework of the IAEA. He said, we're willing to cap at 3.75. We're willing to reduce our cascades, everything you would think people would want, but it was never in good faith. The United States, Donald Trump himself, when he uses the term we, when he speaks of Israel's actions, we did this, we did that. I was fully knowledgeable of this, unconditional surrender. Who are you to dictate terms of surrender to the Iranians if you're not a party to the conflict? So No, the United States has betrayed the trust of Iran and the entire world by committing an act of perfidy. Perfidy, after all, is a crime. It's a war crime. Perfidy is when I hold up a white flag of surrender, ask you to come out to negotiate, and then shoot you. Um, and what the United States did is engage in dialogue to negotiations to resolve this issue, leading the Iranians to believe there would actually be a negotiated outcome, only to set the Iranians up for what was supposed to be a knockout blow by Israel.
So it seems that the opinion of personalities like the IAEA General Director Chief Rafael Grossi, who last week on Al Jazeera, I watched his interview, he said that there is no evidence that Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon, or of other personalities like Tulsi Gabbard, who testified before Congress of a similar viewpoint. These things are thrown out of the window, and diplomacy doesn't matter anymore. Intelligence doesn't matter anymore. And how is policy crafted based on just a couple of people
How is American policy crafted?
who want to please a certain other individual in the region here?
There's no rhyme or reason for what we do.
There used to be
I
checks and
think
balances in place, and
there's no
yeah.
there's no checks and balances. Checks and balances imply due process, which implies a system that's defined by rules and regulations, agreements. What we have is a narcissistic egomaniac who can lie through his teeth at will and not feel any conscience about it. I mean, this man is mentally ill, literally. I mean, he fits the classic definitions of mental illness, incapable of telling the truth. He's like I said, the narcissism is pathological. It's all about Donald Trump, all about Donald Trump, all about him. He's the center of the world. It's a very dangerous situation. We now have a situation where the CIA director and the general of Central Command, Michael Kurilla, have admitted that they stopped using U.S. intelligence and they started repackaging Israeli intelligence, calling it U.S. intelligence to play a game for the president, to say U.S. intelligence believes this, but it was just repackaged Israeli intelligence, and that information is now coming out. This is not how you craft policy. This is how you craft disasters. Again. But it's not just the president. With Iran, the world has had this Iran exception, meaning that no rules apply. Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. Article 4 of the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty is unequivocal. Iran is allowed to have nuclear enrichment for a peaceful energy program. End of story. Israel will craft a lie. No nation ever enriched to 60%. I'll tell you right now, Israel, there are many nations in the world under IEA monitoring who enrich to 60 or even higher percent. The reactors in the world today use a variety of different fuel types, et cetera. But Israel has been allowed to, and again, Israel is a non-signatory to the NPT that has a nuclear weapons program that's outside of the framework of IAEA monitoring, one they won't even acknowledge that exists. The hypocrisy of this state to be trying to dictate terms to Iran that fall outside of a treaty that Israel itself won't sign is absurd. The IAEA director is one of the problems here. You see, he wrote a report to the Board of Governors that said Iran is non-compliant with its obligations under the NPT. That's a huge statement. The first time in the history of Iran's relationship with the IAEA did the IAEA write this report. Israel jumped on that and said, see, they are now pursuing a nuclear weapon. But when people pushed him and said the non-compliance is technical in nature, revolving around issues that have no bearing on a nuclear weapons program, he said yes. So why in God's name at this particular time would you release this report? Are you that stupid?
Or not
And the answer is no,
clarified
he's
in
not
the
that
report.
stupid.
Or clarified in the report since you wanted to write it.
but the timing was
Yeah.
done. He didn't have to release the report. Now he could have delayed the release. He could have asked the Iranians for more clarification. He was pressured to do this, or he willingly did this. But he's also the man that has been working with the Israeli government, transferring sensitive data, the inspectors on the ground in Iran that's supposed to be confidential, and that data has been transferred to the Israeli government. It's only to influence Israeli analysis, but to also facilitate targeting, meaning that the Israelis knew where to drop the bombs because the IAEA told them where the stuff is. Okay. And so, Grossi is the problem, not the solution. Grossi needs to go. He needs to be terminated. The Iranians won't work with this man, nor should they ever work with this man. And the Russians are starting to call him out. But remember, Russia has a problem because if you remember Grossi, when the Ukrainians bombed their own nuclear facility at Zaporizhia, and then claimed the Russians were attacking a facility that the Russians occupied, Grossi was first to run in there and say, this is the most dangerous situation in the world. You're never allowed to attack a nuclear facility. He took it to the Security Council, demanded intervention. And yet Israel bombs Iranian nuclear facilities, and there's not a peep out of Grossi. He issued a couple of statements. Oh, we condemn this. Why didn't you go to the Security Council? Why didn't you call this the greatest threat to international peace and security ever? Oh, because Israel is your ally. Grossi is a traitor to his cause. He should be fired, relieved of duty, and frankly speaking, criminally prosecuted for what he has done.
So Israel is involved everywhere. And let's also talk about their other implication. I mean, we know that for 30 years, Netanyahu's been claiming that Iran is just weeks away from a nuclear bomb. That these weeks away, we've been hearing it for the last 30 years. But Netanyahu's also war-driven worldview began 40 years ago with his claim that terrorism would vanish if the Soviet Union collapsed. He's been consistently lying, yet Western leaders still follow his lead under financing and pressure from lobbies like in the US, in AIPAC. I mean, even they're so entrenched in everything that even in local elections, like I remember watching a debate of New York mayoral candidates, and they were asked during the debate to pledge a visit to Israel. It's on YouTube, this debate. So what does that even have to do with running a U.S. city? So where I'm going at is, also we had Ted Cruz recently on Tucker Carlson. It was openly saying that he puts Israel before America. And we know that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is a Christian Zionist. We know Mike Huckabee is so, and he's been appointed as U.S. ambassador to Israel. So how do we get to a point where this is not even a scandal anymore, but a political credential, to be pro-Israel in loyalty and not America first? Now I'm talking strictly for American politics.
Well, I mean, that's where we are. And it's very difficult when you have the pro-Israeli lobby so deeply ensconced in the highest echelons of American political power, not just at the federal level, but the state level, the local level, where if I want to be dog catcher, they say, will you travel to Israel? Do you support Israel? Well, I just want to catch dogs. But no, you got to express your loyalty to Israel, where criticism of Israel is deemed anti-Semitic, and being anti-Semitic is deemed to be a crime. It's funny. We live in a nation where, we have rampant racism, and it's been a big problem. The KKK, Ku Klux Klan, burns crosses in the fields. That's protected as free speech. White racists can assemble in the middle of an American city and say horrible things about black people that I disagree with, but it's protected free speech. And yet, if you dare criticize Israel for committing actual genocide, that has become now a crime, hate speech, etc. That's the direction we're heading. And so it makes it almost impossible to tear down this pro-Israeli edifice. The only hope we have is that the president who empowered these Christian Zionists and these pro-Israeli personalities ran on a platform of peace. And right now he's in trouble with his base because he has deviated from that. The base was told he's not going to get us into an entanglement. Now, if the president can pull off this ceasefire, he might be able to restore, the faith, the faith of his base. But this if his will allow him to make the compromises necessary to bring this conflict to an end. If he believes that he insistence on enrichment, I believe that he's wrong. I mean, maybe history will show that he's right. But if Iran doesn't back down, then what does the president do? He has to make a compromise. Is this president capable of making a compromise of that scope and scale, especially when faced with Israeli opposition? So, we may not be out of the woods yet when it comes to, American military entanglement. But this president, needs to be aware that if he loses his base, he loses the midterm elections. If he loses the midterm elections, MAGA will be over and Israel will be blamed. The Israelis may have taken it too far in trying to seize control of a sovereign state, because there could very well be a backlash. And this is not a good thing if you're Israeli or if you're Jewish, because the backlash that could happen won't be the backlash of intellectuals. It'll be the backlash of pissed off rednecks who are fully capable of racist violence. And if you get them to turn on the Jews, it will be a bad time for Jews in America. So, and I'm not making a threat, I'm stating reality. So I think it's time for the Jewish American community to understand that if you put Israel first, you run the risk of alienating your community from the American people. You should be an American citizen of Jewish faith. That's the most defensible position in the world. But if your position is because I'm Jewish, Israel first, then you're not American. And if what you're doing is resulting in harm to America, don't be surprised when the American people turn on you.
Very interesting. Well, very interesting what you're saying. Because you are right, Trump's MAGA base was built on a pro-peace, America First platform. But now, many from that base, they do feel betrayed by Trump. We have voices like Tucker, which we just mentioned. We have Steve Bannon. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're all breaking ranks with Trump. They're not supporting this war and what Trump did to bomb Iran, and what they see is an Israel first agenda. So you're right. Trump has to win back this trust. He has midterm elections coming up next year, and if he has more damage done, it would be too late for him to win their trust back. But the thing is, us here in the region, we all believe that even if it was anyone else in power from the Democrats, say, if it was Biden or if Biden was still president or if Kamala was elected, nothing would be different. They'd still be doing Israel's bidding. And you
Sure. Biden did Israel's bidding. Trump in his first term did Israel's bidding. Obama did Israel's bidding. George W. Bush did Israel's bidding. Bill Clinton did Israel's bidding. I mean, the last president to stand up to Israel in a meaningful way was George Herbert Walker Bush in the lead up to the Gulf War, where he basically told Israel to pound sand. But since then, we have had presidents who have pushed back a little bit here and a little bit there. But the bottom line is, after the Gulf War, the pro-Israeli lobby realized that it could never be in a situation again where the security of Israel was at risk, and an American president could veto something of importance to Israel. So they began a concerted campaign to seize control of the United States of America. And they have done so. They have succeeded in doing this. Congratulations, pro-Israeli lobby. You did a great job. Not for a great cause, but you got to call a victory out when you see a victory. They are the dominant lobby in America today. They have taken control of all of the echelons of power. And it's only when the American people revolt against this will you be able to break the backs of these Christian Zionists, Jewish Zionists, these pro-Israeli un-Americans, because you can't be pro-Israeli and pro-American at the same time. You can be pro-American And then you can look at Israel and say, to the extent that Israel does things that benefits the United States, we will support Israel. But when we allow Israel to do things that are to the detriment of the United States, that means we're no longer pro-American, we're pro-Israeli. And that's
Let's not forget all the wars that have been fought by Americans over the last 20 years, wars that were part of BB's rhetoric and agenda, and how many, not just civilians died in those countries. We're talking 1 million in Iraq, but also how many American lives were lost fighting those wars. For whose benefit?
Look, I'm fully aware of that. I was a participant in Desert Storm, and while Desert Storm was not an Israeli-driven war, Israel played an important role in creating the conditions for this. I mean, the immediate cause of Desert Storm was Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, and that dealt with the politics of oil. But people tend to forget that in the spring of 1990, Israel was threatening to bomb Iraq's nuclear facilities, and Iraq deployed 14 missiles into western Iraq equipped with chemical and biological warheads. They said, if you attack us, we attack you. And this was a major crisis. And then that influenced the conduct of the war. We spent an inordinate amount of time trying to hunt down Iraqi Scud missiles in western Iraq that were firing missiles into Israel. Back then, Iraq fired 49 missiles, and the damage done, while I'm not going to minimize it, was nothing compared to what was done to Israel over the course of the past 12 days. And yet Israel, that became sort of one of the central focuses of the conflict. And then when the conflict ended, the way that Israel immediately hijacked every aspect of American foreign policy so that Iraq would never be allowed to come out from underneath the sanctions, that Saddam had to go. Not too many people are aware of the fact that at the end of the war, even though weapons inspectors from the United Nations had been mandated to go in and disarm Iraq, the Israelis had made the decision that the only way you truly will be safe is to kill Saddam Hussein. Of 1993, they were ready to do just that. They had a Sariyat Matkal unit doing the exercise. The training went bad, and 5 Israeli soldiers were killed, so they canceled it. But the Israeli solution, when confronted with a nation that has shown the proclivity and ability to strike Israel, is to kill that leadership, which informs us as to what Israel's next moves will be. Yeah. If you think that even if Israel complies with this ceasefire, that they are finished in Iran, think again. The Ayatollah Khamenei and the Iranian president are on an Israeli death list right now, because Israel is a vindictive nation, and they will not be satisfied until heads have been cut off. That's a dangerous thing. Now, I'll take credit for this because I flew to Israel in October of 1994 and met with Uri Sagi, who was the head of Israeli military intelligence. And he was the man who came up with the assassinate Saddam Hussein plan. And he was there at the training facility when the training went south. Killing Saddam was still their number one priority. When I came in and said, no, why don't you support the weapons inspectors instead? Why don't you give us a chance to do this job right, to disarm Iraq, and then Iraq won't pose a threat? And for whatever I said, the Israelis were ready to do that, and we began a 4-year cooperation. And by the time I finished, Iraq had stopped being the number one threat, went down to like number 8. Saddam Hussein was not an irrational madman, but rather a pragmatic realist that Israel could deal with so long as he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. So that's why I'm optimistic that if we apply the right pressure to Israel, we can get Israel to walk away from regime change. But it's not going to happen on its own volition. The natural proclivities of Israel are to kill people that stand up to them. And this is why it's so important for Donald Trump to get a binding agreement with with Iran over its nuclear program, one that contains the program legally, the treaty that Shamkhani spoke about, one that provides adequate verification, but also one that gives Iran what it wants. I mean, one of the bad things about the Iraqi weapons inspection process is that the United States was never going to allow sanctions to be lifted until Saddam Hussein was removed. So the United States took over regime change. We now have Lindsey Graham in the Senate calling for regime change. We have the President of the United States hinting to regime change. So again, and this is the same president who set Iran up for this attack. Who will ever believe this man? We are our own worst enemies. We have diplomatic tools available to resolve this issue. And the president, through his actions, have hamstrung us, because who will ever trust the United States again? Even if you could get Israel to agree that the best way forward would be, normalization of relations, containment of Iran's nuclear program through treaties, etc. If the president believes that, no, we have to get rid of Ali Khamenei or whoever replaces him, there will never be peace in the Middle East.
Well, I mean, Netanyahu has been professing about the 7 particular countries that he believed that if they would be, the regimes would be overthrown, then peace would prevail in the Middle East. We're over at the 7th country. We all know that. He did it with, Gaddafi's dead also. So let's hope it's not heading in the direction you mentioned. Let's hope sanity will prevail. And I'm optimistic because I'm seeing that even the American public this time, they're more alert, they're more aware. They're not falling into these things like they did back then with the Iraq War. Aren't you seeing it also? I mean, we just mentioned about them.
No, we are, but I mean, let's just talk about the 7th nation. The implication of the 7th nation is that the first 6 nations were a success.
Yeah.
Let's walk our way down. What's number 6 nation? Sudan. That's a success? The civil war that's going on in Sudan right now is a success?
No.
What was the 5th nation? We know number 1 was Iraq. That's Iraq. A success, Iraq. Iraq's a screaming success.
No, it's not. No. In Syria, it's not.
Syria.
It's not.
Al-Qaeda in there. Lebanon.
No.
The jury's out, but it's not. Hezbollah's still in Lebanon. Yemen, the Houthi are there.
Libya, they still
Sudan.
have the civil war. Yes.
So,
exactly.
This concept that that this grand plan is somehow going to work if we just get rid of Iran's government. Regime change doesn't work. It makes things worse. It creates instability that makes Israel's security even more problematic. That's the reality. So people need to stop. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying that the people out there going, if we could just get rid of the Iranian government. Look at the governments you got rid of. And you haven't made the world a safer place. You've made it a more dangerous place. But I think that's what Israel needs that. See, that's how Israel controls America, by creating regimes of instability, uncertainty, chaos. And from that, Israel then projects itself as the only stable force in the region, and America must support us so that we can ensure that the region doesn't spin out of control, because you don't want the towers to go down again. We can prevent it by holding them to account here. And it worked. The dumb American people went, oh, Israel is our friend, is our ally. No, Israel's the worst enemy America's ever had, because thousands of Americans in the past 20 years have died because of Israel. Exactly. Americans who would be alive today. Millions of people in the region, West Asia, Middle East, whatever term you want to use, are dead because of Israel. Israel is the single worst threat to international peace and security there is in the planet.
That's why it's important for the American public, because I do feel that they are waking up to all this. They're now connecting all the dots. It's important for them to become vocal, to contact the local representatives and let them know, because I think things are different now there in society in America. I hope you share.
Well, we'll find out. I don't know. I mean, the base is fickle. The base is fickle. If you remember the movie Gladiator.
Yes.
And the senator turns to the mob is fickle, my friend. The mob is fickle, and the American electorate is a mob, and it's fickle.
Scott, I hope that the dust will settle. I hope that the ceasefire will hold on. I don't know how each side will spin the ceasefire to save face to their people. And I hope there's a chance for the nuclear negotiations to restart. What do you think?
As I said, I'm optimistic for the potential of process. The problem is the participants in the process. The problem is the United States. The problem is Israel. Um, we do live in a world, though, where there is a balance to the irrationality of America and Israel, and that's called Russia and China.
No.
I don't think we're in a situation today where the United States can just be dismissive of Russia and China. And so I remain optimistic that reason will prevail. I am hopeful for regime change in the region, but that regime change would take place in Israel, not Iran. I'm hopeful that the Israeli people will wake up to the reality that Netanyahu has been the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and that the wars he has brought on is responsible for the disastrous destruction that's taken place. And maybe Israel will replace him and bring in somebody who is capable of rational thought, not tied to a legacy of 30 years of Iran bashing. Because we need new leadership, we need new ideas, we need new policies. If Israel now, I think, has to come to the realization that if it doesn't learn how to peacefully coexist with its neighbors, it may not be around in the next 10 years. So I think that's one of the lessons that Iran has delivered here, is that Israel is not invincible. Israel is vulnerable. And if Israel continues to behave irresponsibly, the consequences of their actions could be fatal.
Scott, thank you. Really, thank you once again for joining me and for sharing your insight. I hope to be able to host you again soon. We'll talk soon.
Okay, well, it's a fast-moving target, so we'll see what happens.
We'll keep in touch. Thank you. Have a good
But
rest
thanks
of
for
the
having
day.
me. Yeah, you too.
If you found what Scott had to say impactful, then like, put your comments below, tell us what you think, and share, and definitely subscribe by hitting the notification bell so that you receive alerts on our new drops. We're the only fully English-speaking, woman-led channel broadcasting straight from the region to Western audiences. So tell us, what did you think about what Scott had to say? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're listening.